3:07 in the morning. The phone rang in the stillness of the penthouse, a place where everything was in order, spotless, and absent of any presence other than Caleb Montgomery. He turned over, grabbed his phone, his eyes not fully open yet. The screen flashed an unknown number from Colorado. Normally, he wouldn't answer, but something in his gut told him this time was different. "Mr. Montgomery?" A woman's voice came through, professional but edged with tension. "This is Dr. Alyssa Green from St. Bridget Hospital in Colorado. I'm sorry to call at this hour, but this is urgent." Caleb shot upright. "What's going on?" "You've been listed as the legal father of a premature baby born tonight. The mother, Jenna Caldwell, was admitted with complications and underwent an emergency C-section at 1:40 a.m. She specifically asked us to contact you immediately." The air in the room seemed to thicken. Caleb gripped the phone tighter. "What did you just say?" "Jenna Caldwell. She listed you as the biological father of the child in the hospital records." Caleb's heart pounded wildly. "Wait, we got divorced 7 months ago, and we've barely spoken in almost a year. That's impossible. I understand this is shocking, but you're the only name she left. No family, no friends, no one else." Caleb shot out of bed. He headed straight to the window, staring down at a city still fast asleep. Jenna. The name still carried weight, no matter how hard he'd tried to sever it from his life. They had once loved each other so intensely they believed nothing could break them. But then came the silence. Nights spent under the same roof without meeting each other's eyes, words as cold and sharp as steel, until they finally drifted apart. Caleb clenched his jaw. "I don't believe the child is mine. I'm not in a position to confirm that, but the baby's condition is critical, and we need someone responsible here." "Did she say anything else?" he forced himself to ask. "One sentence." The doctor's voice softened. "Call him. Whether he comes or not, I need him to know." Silence hung for several seconds. Caleb dragged a hand over his face, his heartbeat thundering in his chest. "I'll get on the earliest flight. We'll have the paperwork ready. Thank you." The call ended. He sat motionless at the edge of the bed, feeling as if he had just fallen into a black hole. He didn't love Jenna anymore, did he? And what if this was a trap, a plan to pull him back, to demand something from him? She had always been fiercely independent. But people change after divorce. Anyone could become anything. Caleb stood and began grabbing clothes. The first flight from New York to Colorado was only a few hours away. He unlocked his phone, about to call Lauren. Then stopped. Lauren, his current girlfriend, was an influencer who had risen from podcasts and Instagram. Her life revolved around lights, content, sponsorship deals, luxury trips. She wasn't a bad person, but this wasn't her world. Caleb quickly typed, "Something urgent came up at work. I have to fly to Colorado this morning. I'll call you later." He turned off his phone the moment the message sent. No chance for Lauren to call back. The closet doors swung open. He pulled out a gray suitcase and threw in a few basic outfits. No suit, no tie, no polished coat. He had no idea what he was going there to do. To confirm whether a child was truly his blood? To face the woman he had once called family and had once been broken by? The door slammed shut behind Caleb. A long hallway, a silent elevator, and the Uber waiting on the street below. Outside, the night was still dark, streetlights shimmering across pavement, damp with fog. Caleb sat in the back seat, phone still in his hand, screen pitch black. He had never imagined that on a night like this, his name would be spoken, inside a delivery room, by a woman he believed had left his life forever. But the past, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way back, and this time it carried a life with it. A child he didn't even know what to call. When Caleb stepped out of the rental car parked in front of St. Bridget Hospital, the sun had yet to rise. The mountain morning wind cut through the thin fabric of the hoodie he had hurriedly thrown on when leaving New York. No tailored suit, no tie, none of the polished leather shoes he was used to. Just jeans, sneakers, and his hands shoved in his pockets like a man trying to hold himself together. The hospital lobby was bright but quiet. The receptionist looked up when he said the name, Jenna Caldwell. Moments later, a nurse led him to the recovery ward. Caleb walked down a long hallway under cool white lights, a strange heaviness settling over him, as if he was trespassing into a life that no longer belonged to him. The door opened. Jenna lay turned slightly toward the window, the faint morning light spilling across a face far thinner than the last time he saw her. She wore a pale blue hospital gown, her left shoulder still bandaged, her hair loosely tied back. No makeup, Exhaustion etched into the dark circles beneath her eyes. The incision was still fresh, unhealed. Jenna turned her head at the sound of footsteps. She didn't smile, didn't look surprised. She simply looked at him, as if she had known he would come, even if she hadn't counted on it. Caleb stopped a few steps from the bed, his expression openly tense and suspicious. He spoke without circling around it. "What are you trying to do?" Jenna closed her eyes for a few seconds, as if gathering the last bit of strength to keep herself from reacting too strongly. "I didn't make you come, Caleb. I just told them to call so you would know. The rest, whether you showed up or not, was yours to decide." There wasn't a trace of blame in her voice, no tears, no hope, no performance. And that unsettled Caleb even more. "Why me then? If you don't want anything from me, why say my name?" Jenna turned her face toward the window. "I have no one else, and I thought at the very least you have the right to know, the right to decide what to do with that information." Caleb stayed silent. Inside, he could no longer tell what was real, what was truth, and what was just the remnants of a failed marriage. Jenna had once been so strong that she made him feel unnecessary. Yet today, she lay there alone, fresh from surgery, with no one beside her, and still did not beg him for anything. He couldn't make sense of it anymore. A soft knock. Dr. Alyssa Green stepped in. Her stern expression softened slightly when she saw Caleb. "Mr. Montgomery, if you're ready, I'll take you to see the baby." Caleb looked back at Jenna. She said nothing, just closed her eyes as if to drift back to sleep. He followed the doctor, his hands clenched inside his pockets. The NICU was one floor up, sealed off behind thick glass, the air heavy with disinfectant and the hush of fragile life. The doctor led him to a small incubator, where a tiny being lay, wrapped in a thin blanket, tubes and oxygen lines surrounding his body. A baby boy, skin faintly pink, wisps of soft hair, tiny hands curled inward, as if trying to hold on to something. Caleb wasn't sure what he was feeling. He wasn't familiar with fragility. His life had always been measured in contracts, buildings, numbers. But this life, this tiny being, made a single small movement, and somehow it hurt. Was he the father of this child? "You're not legally confirmed," Dr. Green said gently. But Miss Caldwell did not list anyone else in the records. The father's section is still blank. Caleb turned to her. "So she didn't name me? She didn't put me down?" The doctor nodded. "No, she only asked that we call you. The rest, she said, is yours to decide." Caleb stepped back half a pace. He had never been placed in a moment like this, not by law, not by financial obligation, but by a woman who once loved him, lying just a few rooms away, who had given birth alone, and still respected his right to walk away. He looked at the baby again, eyes fixed through the glass. And for the first time since that phone call, Caleb felt fear, not fear of responsibility, but fear that if he left now, there would be no way back. He remained there, outside the incubator, unable to look away. The boy was so small that his entire understanding of life suddenly felt fragile. A tiny being breathing through oxygen tubes, chest rising and falling rhythmically as if fighting just to exist. No cries, no strong movement. Just life, raw, delicate, but undeniably there. Dr. Green stepped closer, giving Caleb a gentle nod before lifting a small hatch on the incubator. "You can touch him through this opening. We encourage parent contact even before legal confirmation. Skin to skin improves breathing." Caleb hesitated for a few seconds. His hands were still cold from the morning wind. Slowly, carefully, as if afraid he might break something, he reached his hand into the incubator. His fingertip brushed against the baby's tiny hand. Instantly, instinctively, those tiny fingers curled around his. Not tightly, but enough for Caleb to feel it. A faint, trembling grip, but real. His throat tightened. He didn't understand why his body reacted the way it did, but in that moment, the world went silent. It was just him and the tiny being holding onto his finger with everything it had. A memory surfaced before he could stop it. That night, the night Jenna's new art studio opened for the first time, 8 months ago. He had shown up, even though they had been living separately for months. She invited him out of courtesy. He went as a final farewell. They drank together. Not much, but enough to stir old ghosts. He remembered the red dress she wore, the warm golden lighting spilling across the gallery, the faint jazz floating in the background. That night they had slept together. Not out of love, not really out of regret, but like two lost souls grasping at the last bit of warmth before letting go for good. Caleb slowly pulled his hand out of the incubator, mind tangled beyond reason. The boy might actually be his. He pulled out his phone, stepped into the empty hallway, and called Evan. his longtime lawyer and closest friend. Evan's voice was groggy, clearly dragged out of sleep. I need a DNA test, and I need to know what I can do to secure my rights if it comes back positive. Caleb, slow down. Are you even sure? I'm not sure of anything, but I need to be ready. He hung up before Evan could ask anything else. He wasn't in the mood for advice. He needed control. That was his oldest instinct. When lost, build a legal wall first. When Caleb returned to the recovery ward, Jenna's bed was empty. A passing nurse mentioned she had signed for early discharge. With limited insurance coverage, she chose to leave to avoid adding more hospital bills. But every morning, she still came to the NICU at dawn and stayed until late at night. Caleb didn't ask anything more. He simply nodded and walked away. That afternoon, he returned to the hospital. Alone, without calling ahead. Jenna was seated in front of the incubator, eyes fixed on her son. She didn't look at him when he walked in, didn't greet him. She simply remained silent, as if his presence was expected, or at least not an intrusion. When she left, Caleb headed straight to the administrative office. He requested to see the billing department. After a brief round of paperwork, he set his credit card on the counter. I want to cover all costs for Jenna Caldwell. Delivery, recovery, NICU, including any additional charges for the next 3 weeks. The billing clerk raised an eyebrow. Are you family? No. I'm just responsible. When asked if he wanted his name listed on the payment record, Caleb only shook his head. No, keep it anonymous. He didn't do it to be acknowledged, not out of nobility, but because he couldn't stand the thought of her leaving the hospital alone, walking across the cold parking lot, then returning every morning with a small paper bag of food, like an uninvited guest to her own child. He didn't know what to call that feeling, but it made him feel less lost. And sometimes that was enough for a person to start changing, even if just a little. The next morning, Caleb returned to the hospital earlier than usual. Jenna was already seated beside the incubator, exhausted eyes fixed on her son. She didn't look surprised to see him. She simply shifted slightly to the side, making space for him, as if his presence had gradually become expected. They stayed silent for a long time. Only the soft beeping of monitors and the faint sound of the baby's breathing filled the sterile white room. Jenna was the first to speak. I thought I had prepared myself for everything, to be a mother alone, without you, without anyone. But the truth is, no one is ever really ready for this. Caleb didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the baby, his hand resting lightly on the edge of the incubator. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Jenna continued, her voice steady. I stood outside your office for hours, but your new assistant wouldn't let me in. She didn't even ask for my name, just looked at me like a stranger and pushed me out. Caleb turned to her. For the first time that morning, he really looked at her. Why didn't you call? You had my number. Jenna let out a faint, almost amused breath. You changed your number 3 weeks after we left the courthouse. I figured that was how you wanted to handle everything. Cut clean, no loose ends, no lingering threads. I don't blame you. At one point, I believed in that too. Caleb frowned. He had never known any of this. He had assumed she was fine, strong, busy with her gallery, her exhibitions. Not the type to need anyone. He sat down on the plastic chair beside her, fingers interlaced. You've always done everything on your own. Even when we were married, I still felt like you never truly needed me. Jenna turned to him, her gaze softening. I did need you. I just didn't know how to show it. I'm used to carrying everything myself, not allowing myself to depend on anyone. You know why. You know how I grew up. He nodded. They had once shared their childhoods with each other. Hers, with a mother who disappeared when she was 5, and strict grandparents who raised her. His, with a violent stepfather. They had once found comfort in recognizing the same broken pieces in one another. But in the end, it was those very old wounds that kept them from ever moving closer. Caleb looked at Jenna, and for the first time, truly saw the exhaustion beneath her calm. I thought you were okay, Jenna. I thought the divorce was what we both wanted. I figured you'd feel lighter, happier, that you'd finally live the way you always said you wanted to. No one holding you back, no one slowing you down. Jenna gave a faint, bittersweet smile. I did say that, but I never said it meant I stopped loving you. Caleb fell silent. Her words landed like a direct strike to his chest. He didn't know how to respond. They had gone too far to simply go back, yet had never truly let go either. Jenna reached into the small bag beside her and pulled out a folded piece of paper, slightly worn at the edges. I wrote you a letter. When I found out I was pregnant, But I never sent it. She held the paper out to Caleb. He unfolded the paper. Inside were her familiar handwriting, brief, honest, hesitant. Caleb, if you're reading this, it means I was brave enough to give it to you. I'm pregnant. I don't know if you want to hear this, and I don't know if it will change anything. I just want you to know. He folded it back and rested it on his thigh, eyes never leaving her. Why didn't you send it? Because I was afraid it would tie us together the wrong way. Jenna said quietly, I didn't want you to stay out of obligation. I'd rather raise a child alone than start something twisted by duty. Caleb nodded slightly. He understood that, and hated that a part of her had probably been right. Can I ask you something? What is it? The baby's last name. What were you going to give him? Jenna hesitated. I was going to name him Caldwell, not because I hate you. Just, if I was going to raise him on my own, then at least he should have my name. I didn't want my child to grow up carrying a name that was just a faint trace of someone who left. Caleb swallowed. She hadn't accused him, but it still landed like a punch to the chest. He looked back at the baby in the incubator. The child knew nothing of what his parents were wrestling with, yet he was at the center of all of it. And he deserved to be called by the right name, not just legally, but as a presence, a real father, not a crossed-out name on a form. 2 days after that conversation by the incubator, Caleb sat alone in a small cafe near the hospital, laptop open in front of him, phone pressed to his ear. On the other end, his lawyer Evan spoke in his usual measured, slightly cautious tone. Are you sure about this, Caleb? Filing for guardianship now might be seen as pressure, especially with her just having given birth and in a vulnerable state. I'm not asking for full custody, Caleb said, fingers tapping against the table. I just want joint guardianship. She's planning to move back to Texas once the baby is stable. I can't let my son disappear from my life like that. Evan exhaled slowly. I get it, but if she contests, the court will demand a DNA test first, and that process might take longer than you think. I'll do the test. I'm not afraid of that, Caleb said, pausing for a beat. What I need to know is, what can I do if Jenna still insists on leaving? Then prepare yourself, Evan replied. But Caleb, you need to ask yourself honestly, is this for the child or because you can't stand being left behind? Caleb didn't answer. He hung up sitting still, hand clenched around a cup of cold coffee. He thought of Jenna, of her saying she would give the baby her last name, of her long nights alone in the NICU with no one beside her. He thought of himself, a man who never planned to be a father, now drawing up legal strategies just to avoid losing a child he hadn't yet dared to call his own. That afternoon, he returned to the hospital with a different proposal. I want to transfer him to Chicago, Caleb said as they stood in the hallway. Northwestern Medical Center has a more advanced NICU, better equipment, higher survival rates. Jenna frowned. Dr. Green has been with him from the beginning. She knows his condition best. I don't trust anyone more than her. Are you keeping him here because it's truly the best medical decision, or because you don't want to give me a bigger role? Caleb asked, voice calm but edged. Jenna took half a step back. Don't turn this into a chess match, Caleb. This isn't a construction deal. This is a human life. A human life that's breathing through machines in there. And you're refusing a better medical option because of emotion. You're trying to win, aren't you? Jenna's grip tightened on her bag. You don't know how much he eats each feed. You don't know the name of the night nurse. But you want control like it's just a contract to sign. At least I'm here, Caleb replied, voice dropping lower. I'm not abandoning him. You're here because you feel guilty, because you're afraid of looking bad, because I put your name on the record, not because you actually want to be a father. The words hit like a direct blow, and deep down, Caleb wasn't entirely sure she was wrong. He turned away, eyes fixed on the long, sterile hallway. White walls, fluorescent lights, the sharp scent of antiseptic, cold, but not as cold as the feeling running down his spine. They said nothing after that. Jenna returned to the NICU. Caleb walked out to the hospital courtyard, pulling out his phone by reflex. Instagram notifications lit up first. Lauren had posted a new story. He opened it. She was at a Manhattan rooftop bar. Champagne in hand, red lips, laughing beside a man he didn't recognize. Hashtag Tuesday date night. No explanation. No mention of him flying to Colorado. Not a single message asking if he'd arrived safely. He locked the screen and shoved his phone back into his pocket. Everything that once made him feel stable was slipping through his fingers. Work, abandoned mid-approval for a major Boston project. His relationship, reduced to social media theater. The baby, small, silent, lying there, unaware it was the center of a battle between two people who no longer knew each other. Caleb no longer knew what he wanted. He thought he had come here to fight for something important. But now, he wasn't sure if he was really fighting for his child, or for a version of himself he still hadn't found the courage to face. Late that afternoon, Caleb was just leaving an intense meeting with the Manhattan West Side Development Board when his phone started vibrating nonstop in his pocket. He was still halfway in his mind. Blueprints, cost overruns, $100 million contract scheduled to close the next morning. Then he saw the caller ID, St. Bridget NICU. His heart lurched. He answered immediately, hand trembling. "Mr. Montgomery?" Nurse Wilson's voice came fast, urgent but controlled. The baby's condition just took a severe turn. Sudden high fever, oxygen levels dropping rapidly. We suspect possible sepsis. The medical team is preparing for emergency intervention. Caleb didn't even respond. He pivoted instantly, leaving behind his assistant, the conference room, the contract, everything. Voices called after him, but he didn't turn back. They blurred into silence. Only the sound of his footsteps on marble and his own pounding heartbeat remained. He grabbed the first taxi he saw, no waiting for his driver. Everything felt absurdly urgent. His tie was yanked loose, his shirt damp with sweat beneath his suit jacket. In his mind was the image of that tiny child in the incubator, pale, fragile. Those fingers that once wrapped around his, now fighting against something completely out of his control. When he reached the hospital, Caleb practically jumped out before the car even stopped, barely remembering to shove cash at the driver. He pushed through the sliding glass doors and ran down the halls without asking directions. Every face he passed blurred into nothing. The NICU floor was fully lit. The surgery sign above one of the rooms glowed bright red. Jenna was there, shaking, hands clenched tightly against her chest. When she saw him, her knees nearly gave out. Caleb reached her just in time, instinctively wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Her body was ice cold, frail beneath the thin fabric of her sweater. She didn't say a word, just broke into a soundless sob, her face buried against his chest. Caleb held her close, steadying her. For the first time since all of this began, his mind went completely quiet. No contracts, no custody plans, no past wounds, only the boy, being rushed beyond those red-lit doors, small enough to require the whole world just to keep one breath alive. He sank into one of the plastic chairs against the wall, gently pulling Jenna down beside him. They didn't look at each other. They didn't need to. Their eyes remained fixed on the glowing red light above the operating room door, flickering like a pulse outside a body. Caleb's throat tightened, and then suddenly, without warning, the tears came. Fast, violent, as if every year of restraint, every carefully controlled emotion, cracked wide open in an instant. He buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. He, the man who always controlled everything, was now sobbing in a hospital hallway, beside the woman who had once left his life, for a child he still hadn't dared to call by name. Jenna said nothing, but in that moment she tilted her head, resting it gently against his shoulder. A small gesture, not quite comfort, not quite forgiveness. Just one human being who had once loved deeply, sitting beside another who had once left her alone. Neither of them knew how long the time passed. Every minute outside that surgery room felt like an hour suspended midair. After a while, Jenna straightened, but kept her hand resting lightly on Caleb's knee. It wasn't a claim or a promise, just an anchor to keep them both from drifting away into the enormity of their fear. When the doors finally opened, Dr. Green stepped out, fatigue plain on her face. Caleb and Jenna stood immediately, almost lunging forward. "We were able to stabilize him," she said quickly. "It was sepsis, but we caught it in time. The surgery went smoothly. He's being moved back to recovery now. We'll be monitoring him very closely for the next 48 hours. Caleb heard nothing beyond stabilize. His breath left him in a rush, his entire body going slack. Jenna's hand tightened around his. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and in that instant, everything unsaid was suddenly there. The terror, the helplessness, and somewhere deep within, a fragile relief neither dared to say aloud. They returned to the hallway, two silhouettes sitting quietly under the harsh white lights, no longer on opposite sides, no longer arguing, just a child who had just crossed the edge of life and death, and two broken adults who, for the first time, were learning how to stand on the same side. 2 days after the surgery, the baby boy began breathing more steadily, no longer reliant on constant support from the machines. His vitals gradually stabilized, his skin flushed warm instead of pale, his hands no longer icy when the nurses changed his dressings. Caleb came to the hospital every day at the exact same time, a rhythm he'd never had before, not because of meetings, not because of deadlines, but simply because he wanted to be there. The nurses started teaching him how to hold the baby. His hands were awkward, fingers stiff like they'd never been taught to touch anything gently. But the boy didn't cry. He simply nuzzled against Caleb's chest, skin to skin, small but undeniably real. And in that moment, something inside Caleb, something long frozen, began to thaw. A hollow space in him he had never been able to name suddenly wasn't empty anymore. For the first time in 39 years, he felt someone needed him in a way no one ever had. Not for his money, not for his skill, not for his status, but because he was the only person in the world who could hold this child exactly like this. And so Caleb began to speak to him, voice low, steady, as if narrating a story to both the baby and himself. "When I was your age," Caleb murmured, a faint smile tugging at his lips, "your granddad once got so drunk he smashed the dinner table because he couldn't find the TV remote." He let out a quiet laugh. "I was hiding underneath that same table, just hoping he'd forget I existed." The baby didn't understand, of course, but his chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, his tiny head resting against his father's heart. "After that came the foster homes," Caleb went on. "A new room every week. I used to think I'd never need anyone. That being on my own was the only way to survive." Outside the curtain, Jenna stopped. She had meant to step inside, but hearing his voice, she froze. She had never heard him talk about his past like this. Not on dates, not in all their years of marriage. His voice now wasn't that of the man who ran a global design firm. It was the voice of a boy who had survived by locking every door inside himself. "I don't know how to be a father," Caleb continued softly, unaware she was listening. "But I think, if you can learn how to grow up, maybe I can learn how to stay." That day, after leaving the hospital, Caleb went back to the office, opened his laptop, and began writing emails. One to the partners in Singapore, another to the development team in Dubai. Simple, polite, final. He was withdrawing from both projects. His assistant, who had always admired Caleb's precision and unshakable direction, called immediately, alarmed. "What are you doing? We spent 2 years building these deals." Caleb replied with just one sentence. "I spent 39 years to realize I have a son." That weekend, he invited Jenna and the baby to his main design studio in the Lower East Side, not to impress, not to prove anything. He only said there was something he wanted to show them. The studio looked almost exactly as it had the day Jenna last visited for its opening, except now it was less theatrical. Architectural drafts on the walls, natural light pouring through the skylight, and a new section partitioned off behind frosted glass panels. Caleb opened the door to that section and gestured for Jenna to step inside. A small room, light gray walls, soft wooden flooring, white curtains, and a rocking chair beside a newborn crib. Jenna stood still, silent. Caleb spoke softly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile air between them. "I don't know what the future looks like. But I thought, if one day he's old enough to come here, he should have a space that's his." Jenna looked around. On the wall was a frame, not yet hung, holding an ultrasound image. A copy Caleb had quietly asked the hospital to print from the medical records. He had never told her. She turned to him, no smile, no tears. But her eyes were different, no longer guarded, no longer doubtful. As if, for the first time, she was seeing a version of Caleb she had never met before. And maybe, for the first time, she believed he truly intended to stay. Not because someone demanded it, but because he chose it. That afternoon, Jenna arrived just as the last sunlight was reflecting off the studio's glass panels. She walked in without calling ahead, carrying their son, her steps steady, her gaze clear in a way that unsettled Caleb more than any argument ever had. She laid the baby gently in the crib he had prepared, then turned to face him. Calm, composed, almost too composed. "I'm leaving New York," she said quietly. "Probably next week. I've arranged everything with my sister in Austin. The air is cleaner there. Life is slower. It'll be better for him." Caleb didn't speak. He only nodded. "You've done more than enough," Jenna went on. "I know that, but I don't want to owe you." He looked at her, really looked, even though she wouldn't meet his eyes. Then he turned, walked into his office, and came back with a small plastic sleeve. Inside was the letter. The one she once wrote. The one she never sent. He held it out to her. The first time you gave me this, Caleb said quietly, I didn't read it because I was afraid of what I might have already failed to see. But now, I don't need to read it anymore. The answer is already here. Jenna glanced at the letter but didn't take it. Tonight, Caleb continued, before you go, walk with me. Just once. No decisions, no negotiations, just as two people who once knew each other. She didn't nod. She didn't refuse. But when night fell, she was there, at the park near the hospital, just as he asked. They sat on a long wooden bench, in the kind of silence that didn't demand to be filled. Only the soft rustle of leaves, the warm glow of street lamps, the hush of a city briefly forgetting to be loud. Their son slept peacefully in the stroller beside them, tiny hands folded on his chest like he was holding his very first dream. Caleb leaned back, eyes on the starless sky. I'm not sure I love you the way I used to, he said, not looking at her. That kind of love we had when we were young, when we thought two people were enough to defy the world. Jenna said nothing. But I do know one thing, Caleb continued. I don't want to live without him. And if I could choose again, I wouldn't want to lose you a second time either. She turned to look at him, something flickering in her eyes that couldn't quite be named. Are you sure, she asked softly, that when things go back to normal, when work takes over, when there's no hospital, no crisis, you won't disappear? There was no accusation in her voice, only fear, spoken plainly. The kind of fear you earn after being left alone for too long. Caleb didn't answer right away. He bowed his head, exhaled, then reached into his coat. He pulled out the old folded letter, the one she wrote but never sent, the creases worn, the ink slightly smudged at the edges. He unfolded it slowly, eyes moving over every word, words he had already memorized yet had never truly read until now. Jenna didn't say anything. She simply stood and walked toward him, slowly. Their son slept peacefully, unaware that for a moment the world had paused, waiting for something to shift. Caleb reached the last line, the word hope cut in half by the fold, and for the first time, tears fell not from fear, not from guilt, but because he finally understood the one thing that mattered most. He folded the letter gently and held it in both hands, as if cradling the truest part of himself. And for the first time, he allowed himself to cry in silence. Not hiding, not bracing, not running anymore. There are things in life that don't arrive at the right time or in the right form or according to anyone's plans. Yet sometimes, it is exactly those unexpected things that open the door for a person to begin again. Not from zero, but from the place where they once lost themselves. Caleb wasn't certain love would return the way it once was. But he knew, from this moment forward, he would not miss another second of that child's life. And sometimes one right choice, made at the very last minute, is enough to change everything. Have you ever stood on the boundary between responsibility and love? If it were you, what would you choose? If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next journey of the heart. Thank you for listening to the very end. I'll see you in the next story.